Hello, my name is Erin Baer, and I'm an intern for the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights. And today I'm excited to be joined by Melody Daugherty from the Manito Pollinators. This organization does a lot of exciting work in raising awareness about the significance of pollinators and is currently in the works of creating the first ordinance that establishes the rights of pollinators. Thank you so much for joining me today, Melody.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Erin.
Yes. So, can you start by explaining why pollinators are so vital to our environment and why their protection is so crucial?
Pollinators are really vital to our environment and very crucial to all of us because they are responsible for pollination and for creating our food that we eat. 1 out of 3 bites of food is a result of pollination, and that they're a part of the web of life. They've got a significant role to play in I would say, the ecology of the web of life.
Yeah, thank you. Following that, what is the Manitou Pollinators and why did you guys first come together as a group?
The Manitou Pollinators came together as a group back in 2018, and that was a result of Beth Corpenning was the founder at the time, and she became aware of more and more information was coming forward about the rapidly declining numbers of pollinators around the world, not just Manitou Springs, but around the world. And the mission of the Manitou Pollinators is to create, enhance, protect all pollinators and pollinator habitat. We're also committed to creating a pollinator-friendly city in Manitou Springs.
Yeah, thank you. So, what was the first big step the Manitou Pollinators took to promote pollinator protection?
I think, really the first step that we took and that anybody can take and really needs to take is just to make the decision that the pollinators are indeed important, they're necessary, that they, 90% of flowering plants require pollination to create the strawberries you eat in the summertime, right? Or even the beef steak that those cattle need to eat out on the open prairies, right? That dyes in our clothes. So that's one of their functioning roles. So part of it is just acknowledging their existence. That's the first big step that any person can take, that we took. The second action step was the Front Range in Colorado experienced a massive bee die-off and colony collapse in the winter of 2018. The percentages were 70 to 85% had disappeared, died off. That was the alarm call for the Manitou Pollinators. The beekeepers held it was like a public forum for the community to come and listen to resident beekeepers talk about what was going on for them and that what they were seeing with their own colonies, and that the dwindling numbers or the massive die-offs. And so they really educated us of the beekeeper community. And we decided that our mission is to create, enhance, protect. So we decided to step up and to find a solution as to how originally was to support our beekeepers in Manitou. That was the original vision, and then it grew.
Awesome. That's amazing. You guys have also come so far, and I'm excited to continue talking about that. Specifically, one of your organization's goals is to establish Manitou Springs as a pollinator district, which is a very interesting and amazing concept. Can you explain to me what a pollinator is?
Absolutely. So I'm going to step back a bit. In the answer, the solution for the bee colony collapse, when you're looking at a percentage of 75 to 80%, that's significant, and that number is growing across the world, right? We decided that we needed to find a solution that, one, was out of the box, and we also intuitively understood and knew that it had to be for a municipality. That's the game changer. So Beth and I are both gardeners, and it wasn't about having one pretty little garden over on that side of the mountain and then a little pretty garden over on my side of the mountain, right? So that was the impetus, and that impetus led us to the Butterfly Pavilion, Westminster, Colorado. It's the only federally accredited invertebrate zoo in the world, and they offer a certified pollinator district program for municipalities. They also have the experience of working with the city of Boulder, the city of Westminster, the city of Brookfield. They work with communities from a city perspective as to how to become a pollinator district. So a pollinator district is a community that is absolutely committed to conserving and improving habitat for pollinators in all aspects of operations. Pollinator district is a development, including businesses, schools, public facilities, and parks, designed, constructed, and maintained in such a way that pollinator habitat demonstrates a net gain over the footprint of development. A pollinator district engages all of the people who live, work, and play there in this vital work. Community members are vital resources who become citizen scientists, beekeepers, gardeners, and stewards of the land. A pollinator district is a long-term commitment because these habitats and the population of pollinators that rely on them take years to establish and thrive. So a pollinator district, the certification process can take up to 5 years because there's a lot of changes. The biggest lesson that we learned from the butterfly pavilion, and I know a lot as a gardener, but I'll tell you, I've been humbled. When it comes to pollinators, it's a whole different level of education awareness. Pollinators need habitat and food, nesting sites, breeding sites, shelter every 400 feet. That's where the game changer is, to create a long-term pollinator thriving habitat.
And one aspect of that that I think is so cool is how it's not just like individual doing something, it's a community coming together for the sake of protection of pollinators, which is just an awesome idea. And speaking of a community coming together, in 2019, pollinators received recognition from Manitou Springs in the city environmental resolution. Notably, that the first action step of this resolution is to protect pollinators. How does the city aim to be proactive in this regard, and what sort of signal does this send going forward regarding the protection of pollinators?
Thank you for asking that question. So we have to step back in time again for the city of Manitou Springs. We are, I think we're a really progressive community, and we're also an environmental community that it was 2015, going 2015 through 2016, 2017, the city passed an organic land management policy. So we have that within our public services and our park and rec system. And what that means is that chemicals are not used. You cannot be using chemicals unless you apply for a waiver. And that's just in dire circumstances or situations. So the city already had that established, which was, again, when you look at creating pollinator habitat, it's really the pesticides and the chemicals is one of the main leaders for the declining numbers of pollinators around the world, not just Manitou, it's around the world, right? So the city's done that. I think the next big step that they took was to acknowledge the environmental resolution. That was a major win for myself and others who pulled together that resolution, and that was passed in 2019. During that time is when I have brought the pollinator district and the butterfly pavilion. We have partnered up, the Manitou Pollinators are partners with the butterfly pavilion. And so what we do, my responsibility is to host meetings where the butterfly pavilion comes down and we talk about, well, what is a pollinator district? Because it's all aspects of operations in the community. And the city, we've held a couple meetings with them already, very well attended, and our city is very interested. That so much so that we are getting ready to celebrate our first, it's a pollinator garden designed by the butterfly pavilion for Pollinator Week, which is June 21st through the 27th. Around well, at least in the United States. And so that's what we're doing. And that is going to be like our ribbon cutting garden event for Pollinator Week. So the city is working with the Manitou Pollinators to acknowledge that. We actually do meet now on a regular basis to talk about how we can increase more pollinator friendly habitat within our parks and rec systems. So it's really exciting from the city point of view. And then the community, we have, like I said, Manitou is a real environmentally oriented community. Many people already understand the significance of the climate change or crisis, you want to call it, around the world. And we are committed and dedicated to resilience. We're committed and dedicated to making changes that will further, I think, protect pollinator habitat. So more and more residents, families, people, churches are just growing more and more pollinator friendly plants.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your organization is still doing a lot of other exciting work regarding pollinators. Specifically, you guys are in the works of creating the first Rights of Pollinators ordinance, which is fantastic. And I'm curious to know, what does this mean for for pollinators, and what does this mean for people as well?
Well, thank you. To me, it's just been a natural step in evolution for the Manitou pollinators. Okay, truly, it's just been one step after another that's led us further and further along. And what we didn't realize when the Manitou pollinators was created was that pollinators would become so political. Who knew, right? So everybody, I love sitting at, right. I mean, I love sitting on my front porch and watching butterflies fly by. I mean, who knew it would be political? But that's the issue, is that pollinators do not discriminate on the basis of land, of property, of wealth, of your status, of race, gender, anything like that. So that's, as an Indigenous person, that's what we refer to as natural law. Okay.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of built into the system. And I think that along with the environmental resolution, I would walk away still looking at my city and my community and feeling really frustrated that they weren't doing enough.
Mhm.
They were not acknowledging the reality and the seriousness of climate change and its impact on pollinators, because the climate crisis with the planet heating up that's a part of the pollinators' inability to handle that kind of climatic change, right?
Mhm.
So I decided to start reaching out. And that's where Thomas Lindsay and the Center for Democratic Environmental Rights literally just in a very easy, natural way came into the Manitou Pollinators' life. And so here we are. And what does that mean for the Manitou Pollinators? It means that it's a step in the right direction of acknowledging the existence of pollinators, first and foremost, anywhere, right?
Mhm.
And that they, as a species, have the same right as you do and I do to exist, to have a safe, chemical-free environment, to be provided with the food sources, the livelihood, if you will, their livelihood that they need to survive and thrive along with you and I.
Mhm.
And they've been here much longer than you and I, and that they have got no you don't see a butterfly sitting at the city council table saying, please think about me. So it's really about acknowledging their rights and standing up for them and creating a habitat that they need to exist with me, and that I'm so utterly dependent on them because of my own food needs.
Yes, of course. And that's something so important about pollinators, and feel like something people don't really think about much is how much we also rely on them, and they are also relying on us to be there to protect them as well. So it's a very much mutual relationship that we need to establish with pollinators. And just kind of building off of talking about the ordinance a little bit more, I wanted to go kind of into the nitty gritty of what behaviors does this ordinance aim to promote or prohibit, even to protect pollinators.
So the ordinance aims to, we'll start with protecting and promoting, would be the putting in the necessary habitat
Mhm.
that they need. One of the third reasons for the rapidly declining numbers of pollinators is habitat loss. The development is taking its toll.
Mhm.
So there's a responsibility that the ordinance provides, that, okay, then we are responsible for ensuring that we plant enough habitat that our pollinators can flourish, and that their numbers can be, see, this is the issue, that we want to maintain and increase their numbers instead of the continual declining numbers. So that's a part of the purpose of the ordinance. Along those lines is that when it comes to the environment that individuals want to create for their home or their business or city park, there's different ideas as to how to go about that. Some people really believe that the golf course and the lawn needs to be dandelion free. Okay. How do you get a dandelion free lawn or golf course? Usually people are going to be using chemicals and pesticides. Those are those neonics. They are the #1 killers. They destroy the central nervous system of all pollinators. And we're not just talking about bees. Take the time to watch the veterinarians who have to administer to the little birds. We've got migrating birds going through Manitou right now. We've got our hummingbirds back. And when they're exposed to those chemicals, or they're caught in the drift is that somebody 3 houses down from my house has just sprayed their lawn with chemicals. The wind carries it over here. I'm exposed to it. I'm breathing it. It settles on the plants, the earth here. So then I'm having a chemical intake that's detrimental to my life and health and to the pollinators. So the ordinance is about making it very clear that the pollinators, their declining numbers as a result of chemicals. And that if you choose to use chemicals, then I have the right to say, I'm going to fine you, or I'm going to have to, that there's legal ramifications for you violating this ordinance that is not protecting the pollinators' right to exist, to flourish, to thrive.
Yes, thank you. Another great thing that the ordinance does is that it acknowledges the traditional Indigenous people of Manitou Springs, including the Cheyenne, Southern Ute, Mountain Ute, Arapaho people, Shoshone, the Apache, Sioux, Pueblo, Kiowa, and other tribal nations. And I'm curious to know how this acknowledgement of the Indigenous peoples will contribute to the ordinance's effectiveness.
Thank you. That's another excellent question. I think I first have to acknowledge my own. First of all, I am a First Nations woman. I'm an Indigenous person. So what we have found throughout time is that Indigenous people are usually not acknowledged when it comes into these legal parameters of what is healthy or not healthy for the environment. And Indigenous people have always understood the web of life, the balance of life, the interconnectedness of everything that's out there, from pollinators to the trees, to the soil, to the air, to the water. So it's really about acknowledging the first peoples here, and that we have an intrinsic relationship with our natural environment that is often not brought to the table. It's not acknowledged, and that it's imperative when we want to talk about rebuilding the environment, rebuilding pollinator habitat, and those relationships. The pollinators are dependent on the air, they're dependent on the water, they're dependent on the soil, they're dependent on the plants that we put in, we understand that and we know that. So it's really an introduction of sorts to include them in the conversation as we go forward, and that they have a right to this conversation, just like the pollinators have a right to flourish and to thrive.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Finally, there's a lot of work to be done to ensure the protection of pollinators. And one question kind of going forward is, what action can people take to contribute to the cause, whether that be as an individual, like what can I do personally, or what can somebody do in their community as well?
Well, I think the first important thing is just to be aware of them and to appreciate their existence, and to know and understand that that they're here, and that they do more than just look pretty. That 1 out of 3 bites of food, 1 out of 3 bites of food is a result of pollination. I have still yet to sat down to an entire meal to count 1 out of 3 bites of food to see how many bites in that meal was a result of pollination. I think it's just a game. I invite everybody to play that game. Tell me how many bites of food you just had that was a result of pollinators at your lunch. So there's that. It's just acknowledgement. I think also you can certainly just plant pollinator-friendly plants. Don't use chemicals. Join a local organization that wants to promote pollinator awareness, that wants to protect pollinators. Go to your city council and ask for changes with chemical lawn uses.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like a lot of those are easy steps that anybody can take, whether that be learning about what plants in your region are native and are good for pollinators, and even just like joining a local organization that is doing the work that's helping protect pollinators and ensuring that their existence not only continues, but that their populations continue to increase, hopefully in the future. And lastly, is there anything else that you would like to add or share regarding the rights of pollinators or the Manitou pollinators?
Thank you for asking. That's another good question. I think it's just for the Manitou pollinators to be taking this stance the way that we are really is a signal and an invitation to other cities, other municipalities, other states, other countries to join us in creating Rights of Pollinators ordinances to protect these animals that do so much for us, that we take so for granted, and that we need to stop and really become aware of our actions and what we're doing to either increase pollinator life or to decrease pollinator life. Our future this and the other message for the Manitou pollinators and being an Indigenous person and the rights of pollinators. As an elder, part of my responsibility is to be thinking about you, Erin, the future generations, and then the children that are yet to come. And that part of our role, the Manitou pollinators and the Rights of Pollinator ordinance, is really meant to send a message to the future generations that yes, we're thinking about you, and that follow our lead, do what we're doing, keep these ordinances in place, fight for what is right, speak to the truth, do something. Anybody can do anything. Everybody can do something. It's really about that. And that along those lines is whether you're going to create a pollinator district or not, educate, learn about them, and do something with one another. Go plant a garden, plant flowers, but it's about learning. The more you learn about the pollinators, and that's what's so wonderful about the becoming a pollinator district and working with an invertebrate zoo, we're learning so much. And I currently have got a weekly, I call it the weekly pollinator biolog. And so I take pollinators, everything from a wasp to a fly to a moth. And I'm sharing that with my neighborhood, all the neighbors in my neighborhood in Manitou, and we're all learning together, and it's so much fun. I just ran into a young man who has a business, and we were talking about plants, and he's like, Melody, and he's scratching his head. He's like, gosh, he goes, I haven't finished reading your article about yucca and the yucca moth. And he goes, I had no idea that those two species have co-evolved since the beginning of time together. He's like, wow, I'm still thinking, and he's scratching his head. So it's like that. It's about the relationships and the fun and the laughter. And I said, yeah, I'm scratching my head too. I'm like, but that's the mystery. That's the beauty of the mystery about creation.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for all of the work that you do, Melody, and your organization does, the Manitou Pollinators. And thank you so much for your time today and for your words of wisdom of what we can do going forward in order to protect the rights of pollinators and ensure that their well-being and their existence continues into the future for future generations as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Erin. It's been a lot of fun.